Whoa, it's an event quest, but it's here 365 days of the year.
Oh, Gogmazios, not this again.
Oh, well, have you considered moving?
Moving? I just got here.
Well, I mean, if you went, underwater, we probably wouldn't follow you.
Underwater?
Yeah, but, really far down, you know?
Or I could just eat you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could do that too. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, welcome one and all to a lot about Alatreon, but not specifically our Alatreon so much as a potential Alatreon. Back at the celebration of the 15th anniversary of Monster Hunter as a series, a little tidbit of information surfaced about Alatreon, stating that they sometimes live deep underwater in order to stay isolated from other living things, because they just really dislike social interaction that much. Over the past few years, on multiple occasions, we've talked with you guys about the idea of underwater combat returning. In the series as a whole, both Josh and I are generally very positive on the concept of a redone underwater system, and both of us think that it is a very real possibility that this will happen at some point in the future. That, combined with us learning about this extra Alatreon habitat that otherwise has no real in-game bearing, leaves us with one very interesting thought. What would it be like to fight an Alatreon underwater? Let's say for the sake of this thought experiment, Alatreon can breathe underwater. That's not really stated where he lives under the sea. Logically, we would assume that there's probably some sort of secluded underwater cave, but if it was a cave that happened to have a big old pocket of air, that wouldn't make for a particularly exciting thing to talk about. No, instead, let's talk about the concept of Alatreon swimming around in the water, unstably firing off elements in every direction, affecting the water all around him. This is where it gets funky. Assuming we are keeping more or less to the way modern Alatreon works, he has to have modes: fire mode, ice mode, dragon mode. Of course, each element affects the water around him in various ways. Water is a fun substance, after all, conductive of electricity, a relatively low boiling point, a relatively high freezing point, and best of all, Monster Hunter often uses anime logic, meaning that we are exaggerating those factors to the maximum. Technically speaking, the fire, dragon, and ice modes would have not really any notable effect on the fight if it works like Iceborne, as the only thing that really does is tell you what element that you're supposed to be using against him. As much as I really want to give him the equivalent of a Lunastra heat and just boil or chill the water around him depending on what mode he's in, so you have to chug cool or hot drinks. Worth pointing out, Lunastra, however, probably wouldn't handle the ocean quite as well. All of that said, we could absolutely let the attacks, like the general attacks, mess with that type of thing, that type of area denial. One thing that I love about underwater combat is the way that the whole concept of movement space changes. Rather than only moving left, right, forward, or back, you can also go up and down, and you have that entire room around you to traverse as well, meaning that they can lock off more space of the area and not feel too constricted. You can still feel comfortable while letting them affect the fight in a greater way, and every area and fight is designed with this knowledge, with this idea. That said, a patch of fire on the floor could easily translate in this space to a bubbling sphere of boiling water, marking the spot that an attack makes contact, dealing damage to you if you're inside of it. For ice attacks, you could, even for lesser ones, do the same thing, but for cold instead of hot, and stronger ice attacks could even make a little cube of ice that just slowly floats up and out. But it's a physical obstacle. Look, I'm a bit crazy, okay? The thunder, well, that one is actually really interesting for one major reason. Alatreon's lightning doesn't come out of Alatreon. It comes from the sky. He just controls it. He directs it. As well, lightning does not travel through water the same way that it does through air. It treats it more like a wall than anything. When lightning strikes the ocean, it spreads horizontally on the surface rather than going particularly deep. But if we are assuming Alatreon's horns work like some sort of super-powered biological lightning rod, then you could argue within Monster Hunter's suspension of disbelief, he could manage to call lightning fully down through the water as he normally does, albeit with the caveat that there would be a bit of a longer delay between his motions and the actual hits, as well as the attack probably having a sort of cone shape, as the lightning is shrinking through the movement, dispersing into the water. Again, water works a bit different than air in this scenario. In most scenarios, it's water. Dragon, well, no one particularly knows what dragon is in terms of like a relative real life thing, but I like to imagine in this specific context, since almost all of Alatreon's dragon attacks are melee, we could use it to extend his range on those melee attacks, essentially saying that dragon element turns the water that he touches into an extension of his body, like it hardens the water almost like a solid, moving as a part of his attack. And then finally, the one that ties all of this fun together, water.
What the water?
Yes, the water. I know we are already underwater, but what does water do underwater, you ask? Well, it pushes. Water displaces water when pushed out with pressure. And so comes the thing that ties all of these mechanics that I've outlined together. Alatreon has water attacks that push around the water around him, including you with the water, and also the zones of cold and hot water that he creates with his other element attacks. The zones of electrified water could also be affected by this after all. Remember that lightning has a bit of a larger delay to reach this far down. You're pretty far into water. If we're giving him the benefit of the doubt to say that he could still use this lightning in the first place, you could easily say that he has time to combo it with a water attack as well. The dragon moves that I imagine he would have a hefty knockback as well to try and push you into these dangerous areas. As for the Eschaton Judgment, the biggest remaining question of the bunch, well, this is the final touch. As for whether or not we still keep in the elemental damage requirement threshold, I won't touch that. Some people hate it, some people love it. I'm gonna leave it the way that the regular design is, the way that the developers want it to be. If they want to change it, that's their choice, but I'm going to change it in different ways. The actual Eschaton itself would be a massive area consuming sphere around Alatreon instead of a circle. Obviously, you gotta take into account the different area, the element depending on his current mode, and the only way for you to survive, well, you'll have to actively heal while it's happening like Iceborne. It's sort of slow damage, and you can also cut the damage down massively by swimming into the correct elemental bubble. Remember how his fire attacks make little hot boiling bubbles of water and his ice attacks make cold bubbles? Well, when he's doing his ice eschaton, swim into the hot bubble and you'll take less damage. Makes sense, sorta, no? Like, logically, I think so. At least that's my idea for how to evolve Eschaton Judgment for use underwater while still sticking to its original concept as much as possible. It is sort of weird to consider how Alatreon would swim underwater just like as a general thing, but I have to imagine that they'd make it look natural as all hell. You can't have a black dragon looking derpy after all. It has to look cool. That said, because I'm me, I do have a few silly suggestions to that I'm sure that no one will be upset about. You know how he sometimes does a double paw slam attack in his front? Well, underwater, that same animation with the momentum that he has would make him do a front flip. In my opinion, I'm just saying. As well, because ice floats, any ice created underwater would, rather than falling from the sky due to gravity, instead slowly rise through the water due to, well, also sort of gravity in a way. So a number of ice block shooting attacks would need their angles changed to still be effective. And most interestingly, the attacks where he shoots down a big old blast of ice shards under him would make almost a sphere or a cylinder coming back up around him rather than just connecting with something under him. Other than that, I just expect a lot of spinning, fighting upside down, the type of funky stuff that a creature starts to take advantage of when it is properly used to combat underwater. I think that just about covers it though. Then, all of my thoughts on what an underwater fight could look like for Alatreon, given the fight that we got in Iceborne, in the semi-possible world where we get another underwater-focused Monster Hunter game in the future that happens to also have an Alatreon living in it too. Do you like the ideas that I have put across here, or do you think that I went a touch overboard? What are some ideas of your own that you have for this type of concept? What would you like to see? And hell, what ideas do you think are even way too over the top but you want to talk about anyways? I've been Cotton Dinosaur. Remember to like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.